Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the week of October 28th, 2018, the podcast that kayaks in an audio stream. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's chelate the news of the bogus. Earlier this year, we covered the legislation known as FOSTA, the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, passed in the wake of the Backpage shutdown, and we predicted, as did many, and as always happens with such legislation, that it's going to have the opposite effect of the one intended. We even covered law enforcement officials saying it's actually interfering with their ability to find and prosecute sex traffickers. Now, a report from San Francisco shows that crimes related to pimping and sex trafficking have more than tripled in 2018. Law enforcement officers also made fewer arrests since they no longer have sites like Backpage and Craigslist to assist in their efforts. We're also seeing increased violence against sex workers, which should have been foreseeable anytime you stop them from having the ability to work for themselves and make them turn to pimps. That's the conclusion of Pike Long, Deputy Director of St. James Infirmary, a clinic for sex workers in San Francisco. Quote, "Without being able to advertise online, a huge number of sex workers were forced to go outside, and many have reported that former pimps came out of the woodwork, offering to manage their business again since they were now rendered unable to find and screen clients online. The very bill that was supposed to stop trafficking has quite literally given formerly irrelevant traffickers new life." And what are you hearing from the major news media? Nothing. What are you hearing from celebrities like Amy Schumer, Seth Meyers, and Tony Shalhoub, as well as many others who publicly stumped and lobbied for FOSTA? Nothing. No acknowledgement they were wrong, no admission that their claims were blatantly untrue. Why? If they really cared about sex trafficking, why are they silent about this? Somehow, I think we all know the answer to that. Meanwhile, Section 230 continues to be eroded in the U.S. and elsewhere, threatening the very freedom that made the internet great to begin with. I hate having to warn people of things they should already be able to prevent. FOSTA is one of them. Measles is another. Yes, there's another measles outbreak in Europe, and yes, it's due to parents refusing to vaccinate their kids. And experts say the same thing might cause it to come back here to America. So far, there have been 41,000 cases throughout Europe, resulting in 40 deaths. And as we've seen before, this is not the simple childhood disease the anti-vaxxers like to make it out to be. Even if you don't die, you could become blind, deaf, or crippled for life. And despite their claims that it makes you stronger, measles actually weakens your immune system permanently. There have been over 2,000 cases in Italy. Even in England, which was declared free of measles by the WHO a year ago, cases are coming back in force. And the consistent factor leading to it all? Parents refusing to vaccinate their children. 95% of the population needs to get 2 doses of the measles vaccine in order to have herd immunity and stop the spread. But in some areas of Europe, that has dropped to 70%. In the U.S., measles was declared eliminated in 2000. Before the vaccine was introduced in 1963, there were 3 to 4 million cases annually. Vaccines took that down to nothing. But in certain parts of the country, vaccination levels have been dropping as anti-vax liars convince parents that vaccinations lead to autism and all sorts of mean, nasty, ugly things when they don't, and we know they don't, and that these are just simple childhood illnesses when they aren't, and we know they aren't. And all that needs to happen is for one infected European to visit one of these areas. Here's hoping we don't learn our lesson the hard way, but unfortunately, it looks like we might have to. More Bogosity from Europe. Academics are attempting to persuade lawmakers in the UK that the so-called obesity epidemic that we covered last week was caused by, get this, internet memes. Several academics from Loughborough University wrote in a letter to a parliamentary committee that many memes contain inappropriate material, such as an overweight child with the caption, "Free food? Count me in!" a meme that was included in the letter. They also included one where a human body was constructed out of pizza and hamburgers, and one where a chocolate bar was washed with soap with the hashtag clean eating. They bleated, "Such is the pervasiveness of internet memes that the vast majority of users display little, if any, emotion when sharing these memes." They're graphics. How do you want them to display emotion in such a format? This is nothing more than the latest tactic among pseudo-intellectuals to label their enemies as unempathetic. Quote, "Internet memes have the potential to normalize undesirable behaviors such as trolling, body shaming, and bullying, and a lack of emotion may be indicative of a larger apathy with regards to such practice." Wait a minute, they can't be body shaming and normalizing unhealthy eating. Make up your minds. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ridicule is normalization. And hey, by condemning obesity as unhealthy behavior, aren't you the ones body shaming by your own distorted logic? They have this whole section on evidence, which contains precisely zero evidence of a causative relationship between these memes and obesity. They were so desperate for one, they even committed an equivocation fallacy when they included Daniel Dennis' description of memes as a way of behaving, roughly, that can be copied, when he was not talking about what people call memes on the internet, but an evolutionary model of how ideas spread and develop through society, as first described by Richard Dawkins in his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene. Internet memes are not examples of memes under this anthropological model. These academics either don't know what they're talking about, or they're outright lying. And now it's time to repudiate this week's biggest Bogon emitter. OpenVPN is a very good protocol standard for VPN clients and servers. It's also a software application that provides this functionality, which is developed by OpenVPN Incorporated. As good as it is, though, their CEO, Francis Dinha, just made some very weird and very wrong claims. So as we've covered, a VPN, or virtual private network, is very good at encrypting the first leg of your internet connection so your ISP and maybe even your government can't see what you're up to. It also hides your originating IP address from the web server and anyone else along the way who might be spying on the connection. It's also good at protecting against snoopers as well as many kinds of malicious attacks. The trade-off is, you have to go through a VPN provider, and that means having to trust that company. So security experts have come up with criteria for choosing a good one. One is that they not log your activity, so law enforcement or hackers can't get it after the fact. Another is that they not be in a Five Eyes country, which we've talked about before. That's the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, who spy on each other's citizens and share that information with each other. BoxPN, the one I use and recommend, not only doesn't log, it's also located in the Seychelles. It also supports OpenVPN connections. You can get it at vpn.bogosity.tv. But Dinha has a very weird criterion, that they should not support BitTorrent. Quote, "Use of the wrong VPN to go through BitTorrent and access the dark web just to get free content exposes you to bad actors who can extract value out of whatever you're receiving in other ways." Okay. First of all, BitTorrent has nothing to do with the dark web. You also don't access the dark web through a VPN. You access it through Tor, an encrypted peer-to-peer network. And what does accessing BitTorrent or the dark web have to do with a VPN? This makes no sense, and anyone with the slightest knowledge of internet protocols should know that. Quote, "For all these reasons, it's essential to choose a VPN that doesn't allow the use of BitTorrent and follows all applicable United States laws. It's the only way to protect yourself against liability." What? BitTorrent traffic causes liability issues? How does that make sense, given that all regular ISPs allow BitTorrent traffic just fine? And BitTorrent has many legal use cases, and the protocol is used internally by Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, and many others. Why should a VPN block it? One hopes this isn't just a sideways PR campaign for OpenVPN's own VPN service, Private Tunnel. But the weird thing is, Private Tunnel allows BitTorrent traffic, even in the Netherlands and Switzerland where peer-to-peer blocking rules are in place. So all of that makes OpenVPN CEO Francis Dinha this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now let's base jump this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
And from our How Did You Screw That Up department, it goes to the U.S. Army for, get this, accidentally dropping a Humvee on a North Carolina neighborhood. The Humvee had been loaded onto an Air Force C-17 Globemaster aircraft in Joint Base Charleston near Goose Creek, South Carolina, and was intended to be dropped just outside of Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Instead, it was dropped over the nearby town of Cameron. According to base spokesman Tom Cullum, quote, "We don't know what happened, but the platform went out early and landed in a rural area. There was no one hurt, no private property was damaged." The aircraft landed safely at Pope Army Airfield. The Humvee parachuted down in a wooded area in a Cameron neighborhood between Sanford and Southern Pines, some 20 miles from Fort Bragg. What I want to know is, if it lands on your property, do you get to keep it? Hey, Christmas came early! Thanks, Santa! McCullum said, quote, "Everything worked as it was supposed to, except it went out early. Yeah, except for the part where we screwed up, everything went fine. There's just no way anyone other than the U.S. Army could have been this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this In the Middle of the Other Side, away from everything else on the other side, in parentheses, capital letters, quotated edition of the Bogosity podcast. Come join the discussion at forum.bogosity.tv or discord.bogosity.tv, and feel free to send a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate to Shane DK on PayPal, or if you want to use crypto, you can donate at altcoins.bogosity.tv. You can also support Shane DK on Patreon to get the podcast and my YouTube videos early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from H.L. Mencken. "One of the main purposes of laws in a democratic society is to put burdens upon intelligence and reduce it to impotence. Ostensibly, their aim is to penalize antisocial acts. Actually, their aim is to penalize heretical opinions." The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.